I'm Nick on the Technical Product Marketing team at Celigo. Today, I'll demonstrate an example flow for lead syncing. In this demo, I'll show how Salesforce can automatically sync new or updated leads to ActiveCampaign. Imagine I'm a marketing or revenue operations manager using Salesforce as my CRM and ActiveCampaign as my marketing automation platform. I want Salesforce to automatically sync new or updated leads to ActiveCampaign. We'll start by looking at the Salesforce export by clicking on the export icon here. First, we track any lead updates or changes in Salesforce. We want to ensure our Salesforce export is named appropriately and that our Salesforce connection is online and running. Next, we will write an SOQL query to select all relevant lead information, including the first and last name, email, phone number, company, and the Salesforce ID. We also want to set our export type to Delta so that we can only export modified data. And this will be determined by the last modified date and will only export data that has been modified since the flow last ran. Next, we will look at the ActiveCampaign import by clicking on the import icon here. We want to map each lead's updated fields to the corresponding record in ActiveCampaign, ensuring custom fields are included. First, we want to make sure that our import is named appropriately and that the ActiveCampaign connection is online and running. We also want to make sure the API resource is correct, which is set to contacts, as well as the API endpoint is also set correctly, which is sync a contacts data. Next, we will click on the import mapping to look at the ActiveCampaign mapping. The mapping should match up with the data exported from Salesforce, which will be the email, first and last name, phone number, and the Salesforce ID. Lastly, for the ActiveCampaign import, we want to set up a response mapping by clicking on the response mapping icon here. When setting up the response mapping, we want to retrieve the ActiveCampaign ID, so we will set the response mapping to ID, and we will name it HCID for ActiveCampaign ID. Lastly, we want to set up our Salesforce import to store that ActiveCampaign ID. This is where we will send back the ActiveCampaign ID for the newly created or updated lead from Salesforce. This is to ensure that the two systems are correlated to one another and for cleaner data. We will click on the import icon here. We want to make sure this import is named appropriately and that the Salesforce connection is the same one from the initial export step. We want to update our S object type to lead, where the operation is update. We can also find existing records through the Salesforce ID gathered in the export step so that we can match up the correct Salesforce leads to update or add. Next, we'll click on the import mapping for the Salesforce import. In this mapping, we want to retrieve that ActiveCampaign ID from the response mapping from the previous step to be stored in a custom field for ActiveCampaign IDs in this newly created or updated Salesforce lead. As you can see, by streamlining the lead syncing process, we turn a previously manual updating process into a real-time automation, providing all stakeholders with up-to-date lead information.